Tonight, we're not going anywhere exciting. We're not chasing anything. We're just going to walk very slowly backward through time, across the quiet corners of American history that most people never think about before they fall asleep. There is no test at the end of this, no dates you need to remember, just soft candlelight, creaking wood, distant rivers, and the small, ordinary line. Long before there were roads or fences or maps with names on them, there was a village near a slow, wide river, somewhere in what we now call the eastern woodlands of North America. It is early evening. The sky above the treetops is turning a soft orange, fading slowly into a deep blue at the edges, the way it does every single evening, the way it has for thousands and thousands of years. Smoke rises gently from a cluster of round, dome-shaped houses made of bent wood and woven bark. The air smells like wood smoke, wet leaves, and the faint sweetness of corn roasting slowly over coals. 1,000 years ago, in villages like this one, families lived close to the land in a way that is hard for us to imagine now. The Haudenosaunee, the Algonquian peoples, and hundreds of other nations across this continent had already been farming, fishing, building, and trading for generations upon generations before any ship. Their knowledge of this land, every bend in the river, every season of every plant, every path through the forest, had been passed down quietly, patiently, from grandparent to parent to child, for longer than anyone could count. Picture the fields just beyond the village. Long, gentle rows of corn, beans, and squash growing together, their vines wrapping slowly around each other like old friends leaning close to share a secret. The people called them the Three Sisters. The corn grows tall and gives the beans something to climb. The beans, in turn, pull nutrients quietly into the soil, feeding the very ground that feeds them. And the squash spreads low and wide across the earth, its broad leaves shading the soil, keeping it cool, keeping the weeds away. 3 plants growing together, quietly taking care of one another, the way people in the village also quietly took care of one another. Near the edge of these fields, an old wooden fence made of woven branches leans slightly with age. It has kept out deer and rabbits for years, patched here and there with new branches each spring. Nothing here is ever truly new. Everything is mended, renewed, cared for, season after season. The same way a favorite blanket is patched instead of thrown away. Children are finishing their evening chores, moving slowly now, tired in the pleasant way that only a full day outdoors can make you tired. A young girl carries a woven basket of dried herbs toward one of the houses, careful not to spill a single leaf. Her little brother trails behind her, dragging a stick through the dirt, in no hurry at all. An older woman sits near the fire, weaving a basket from thin strips of ash wood, her fingers moving without her even needing to look down. She has done this so many times, through so many summers, so many winters, that her hands simply remember, all on their own, the way your own hands remember how to fold a blanket, or braid a rope, or button a familiar coat. Beside her, a small clay pot simmers gently over low coals, filled with a stew of squash, beans, and dried venison, the steam curling upward and disappearing into the evening air. Nearby, a group of men are returning from the river, their canoes gliding silently over water that has gone dark red with the last of the sunset. The paddles dip in and out of the water with barely a sound, each stroke practiced and unhurried. They carry fish wrapped carefully in wet leaves, still cool from the river. Nothing here is ever wasted. Not the fish bones, which will be ground down and used to help the corn grow taller next season. Not the corn husks, which will be dried and woven into soft-soled shoes, or twisted into rope, or used to wrap small cakes of cornmeal before they are baked in the ashes. Not even the smallest twig from the fire, which, once it is burned all the way down, becomes ash to soften the soil in the garden. Everything moves in a slow, quiet circle, from the earth, back to the earth, and around again. There is a rhythm to this life, one that repeats itself so naturally that no one even has to think about it. Wake with the light, work with the season, rest with the dark. In spring, the fields are turned and planted. In summer, they are tended, weeded, watched over carefully as the corn grows tall and green. In autumn, everything is gathered, the corn husked, the squash stored in cool underground pits, the fish smoked and dried to last through the coming winter. And in winter, when the fields lie quiet under frost, the people gather close around their fires, mending tools, telling stories, waiting patiently for the light to return. Tonight, as the last color drains slowly from the sky, cooking fires glow warm and orange inside each of the round houses, their light flickering softly against the curved wooden frames and the woven bark walls. From a distance, the village looks almost like a cluster of small, gentle stars that have settled down among the trees to rest for the night. An old man sits just outside the doorway of his home, watching the smoke drift upward from a dozen small fires at once, twisting together into one soft gray haze above the rooftops, before disappearing into the darkening sky. He has watched this same sight every evening of his long life. It never once feels ordinary to him. Some things, he has learned, are worth noticing again and again. The smoke rising, the fires glowing, the whole village slowly exhaling after a long day of work. Somewhere near the center of the village, a small group has gathered around the largest fire. An older woman is telling a story about the river, about the first people who ever walked along its banks, about how the corn and the beans and the squash came to grow together as sisters. The children lean in close, chins resting on their knees, eyes heavy, but still watching the fire, still listening. This is how history has always traveled here. Not written down on paper, but carried carefully inside stories, spoken aloud, again and again, fire after fire, generation after generation. As night falls fully over the village, the sounds around it slowly begin to change. The wind moves gently through the tall grass at the edge of the clearing, whispering the way it always does at this hour. Somewhere out past the fields, an owl calls once, low and soft, and is answered a moment later by another, farther off. Frogs begin their quiet chorus down near the riverbank, a steady, comforting hum that will continue unbroken all through the night. Inside one of the long houses, someone begins to hum, low, slow, almost like a lullaby. The same simple melody that has been hummed in this village for longer than anyone can remember. One by one, the fires outside are allowed to burn down, from bright orange flame to soft, gentle embers, glowing quietly like small pieces of the sunset that stayed behind after the sky went dark. Mats are unrolled inside each home. Furs and woven blankets are pulled close. A mother settles her youngest child against her side, humming that same soft tune, patting his back slowly, evenly, the way mothers have done since long before anyone thought to write anything down at all. Outside, the stars above this quiet river valley are impossibly bright, thick and scattered across the whole sky, uninterrupted by anything at all. No city lights for 1,000 miles in any direction. No distant hum of engines, no glow on the horizon. Just smoke drifting gently upward and starlight drifting gently downward, meeting somewhere quietly above the sleeping rooftops. Down by the river, the water moves on exactly as it always has, low and steady, sliding past smooth stones and fallen logs, carrying small silver reflections of starlight along its dark surface. It does not pause for the village. It does not pause for anyone. It simply keeps moving, patient and endless, the way rivers always have, long before any of us were here to notice, and long after we are gone. The last few voices inside the longhouses grow quiet. The humming fades into soft, even breathing. Somewhere, a dog curls up near a doorway and lets out one long, contented sigh before falling still. And the whole village, tucked gently between the dark trees and the slow-moving river, settles at last into sleep, safe and warm and unhurried, exactly the way it has settled into sleep every single night for 1,000 years. Let your own breathing slow down the same way now, in and out, like the village, like the river. The ship and the shore. Now let the centuries drift forward, slowly, like a tide coming in. It is the early 1600s. Somewhere along the rocky coast of what will one day be called New England, a small wooden ship sits anchored just offshore, its sails hanging loose and still in the evening air. The ship is small by any modern measure, barely longer than a few houses placed end to end. And yet it has carried, within its creaking wooden belly, an entire small world across an entire ocean. The people aboard have been at sea for more than 2 months. Weeks of gray water, cold wind, and cramped wooden decks. Weeks of storms that tossed the ship like a toy in a bathtub. And weeks of flat, windless days where the sails hung useless and the whole vessel seemed to simply sit still on the water, going nowhere at all. Tonight, for the first time in a long while, the sea is calm, truly calm, the kind of calm that makes the whole ship feel, for a few hours, almost like solid ground. Below deck, lanterns swing gently from wooden beams, their small flames casting soft, shifting shadows across families huddled together on thin mattresses stuffed with straw. The air down here is thick and close, smelling of salt, tar, damp wool, and the faint sour smell of a hold that has carried too many people for too many weeks. But tonight, none of that seems to matter as much. Someone coughs quietly in the darkness, then settles again. A baby has finally fallen asleep after what felt like hours of fussing, and his mother sits perfectly still, afraid to move even an inch for fear of waking him. An old wooden Bible sits closed on a trunk nearby, its leather cover soft and worn from 100 anxious hands turning its pages during the long crossing. Read aloud during storms to calm frightened children. Read quietly in the dark by those who could not sleep. Read simply for the comfort of familiar words in an unfamiliar, rocking world. Along the narrow wooden walls, small bundles of belongings are tucked wherever there is space. A few tools, a few pieces of clothing, a small chest of seeds carefully saved for planting once land is finally reached. There is remarkably little. A whole life folded down into whatever could fit beneath a low, creaking deck. These were ordinary people. Farmers who had worked land they did not own. Weavers whose small workshops could no longer support a growing family. Younger sons with no land left to inherit, since everything back home had already been promised to an older brother. Families searching for something, freedom to worship as they wished, land to call their own, a fresh start in a place with no history yet written upon it, or simply distance from a life that had grown too hard, too crowded, too uncertain to bear any longer. They did not think of themselves as brave, most of them. They thought of themselves as tired of waiting for a life that never seemed to arrive. And so they had gathered what little they had, said goodbye to places and people they might never see again, and stepped up on deck. A young sailor leans against the railing, looking out at the dark shape of the shoreline in the distance. Pine trees, dense and endless, rising up from rocky cliffs that catch the last silver edge of moonlight. No lights anywhere along that shore. No roads, no smoke rising from chimneys, no candlelight glowing in windows, just an enormous, dark, silent land, stretching farther than his eyes can follow in either direction. He is young, perhaps 17, perhaps 18, and this is his first long voyage. He has heard stories about this land from other sailors, second-hand tales passed from dock to dock, each one a little different from the last. Some say it is empty and waiting. Some say it is thick with danger. He does not know which stories to believe, and so, for now, he simply watches and listens and lets the cool evening air settle against his face. Up on deck, a young sailor leans against the railing, looking out at the dark shape of the shoreline in the distance. Pine trees, dense and endless, rising up from rocky cliffs that catch the last silver edge of moonlight. No lights anywhere along that. He does not know that in a few generations, small wooden buildings will rise along this very shoreline and grow into towns with white church steeples and narrow cobblestone streets. He does not know about the busy harbors that will one day be crowded with hundreds of ships, sails stacked against each other like a forest of white cloth, or about the roads that will one day stretch from this rocky coast all the way to a distant ocean he cannot even begin to imagine tonight. He does not know any of what is coming. Tonight, he only knows the smell of pine drifting faintly across the dark water, mixing with the salt smell of the sea, and the soft, steady sound of small waves lapping gently against the hull of the ship, over and over, like a slow, patient heartbeat. Somewhere on the shore, hidden in the shadows of the tree line, the people who already lived on this land, who had lived here for thousands of years before this. A few figures stand very still among the trees, their eyes fixed on the strange, dark shape floating in their bay. Its tall wooden masts, unlike anything they have seen, rise from the water before. They speak quietly to one another, low voices barely above a whisper, deciding, cautiously, what this new arrival might mean. They have their own stories, their own history stretching back long before memory, their own rhythm of fishing and planting and gathering and resting, tied closely to the changing of these very seasons along this very coastline. Tonight, they are simply watching, curious, careful, uncertain, the way anyone is uncertain when something entirely new appears at the edge of a familiar world. Two worlds sitting quietly across dark water from each other tonight, one aboard a small creaking ship, the other hidden among quiet pines, each one watching the other with a kind of careful curiosity, each one unaware of everything that is about to change, slowly, over the many years still to come. But tonight, none of that has happened yet. Tonight, there is only stillness. There is no history being made yet, no story being written, no outcome yet decided. There is only this one quiet evening, suspended gently between two worlds that have not yet touched. Back aboard the ship, most of the passengers have finally settled into an uneasy, exhausted sleep. A woman near the stern murmurs something softly to her young daughter, who has crawled quietly into her lap, despite being far too old by her own estimation for such things. Neither of them minds tonight. The girl closes her eyes, comforted by her mother's steady heartbeat and the gentle rocking of the ship beneath them. Near the bow, an older man sits alone for a while, mending a torn piece of rope by lantern light, his fingers slow and careful in the cool evening air. He has made this crossing once before, years ago, and something about the stillness of tonight reminds him of that first voyage. The same creak of old wood, the same smell of salt and tar, the same wide, quiet sky overhead. Above them all, the sky stretches out, enormous and clear, filled with more stars than any city dweller could ever imagine. The very same endless field of stars that once watched quietly over the village by the river, so many hundreds of years before. The stars do not know or care that a small wooden ship now floats beneath them, carrying tired, hopeful people toward an unfamiliar shore. They simply shine on, patient and constant, the way they always have. The ship rocks gently, almost imperceptibly, with the slow rhythm of the tide. A soft, steady motion, back and forth. Let your eyes stay closed now. Let the gentle rocking of the ship rock you too. Back and forth, slow and steady, the way it rocked so many tired, hopeful travelers to sleep on quiet evenings, just like this one. In and out, like the tide, like the ship, like the whole dark, silent shoreline, waiting patiently beneath an endless sky of stars. Let's move forward again, softly, like turning the page of an old book. It is now the middle of the 1700s. Somewhere in the rolling hills of Colonial, Massachusetts or Connecticut, a small farmhouse sits nestled among snow-covered fields, its windows glowing with warm, flickering light against the deep blue of the evening. Inside, a fire crackles low in a wide stone hearth, its warmth reaching into every corner of the small main room. The smell of wood smoke mixes with the smell of drying herbs hanging from the ceiling beams, rosemary, sage, dried mint for tea, all tied in small bundles that sway gently whenever someone walks beneath them. A heavy iron pot hangs above the coals, filled with the last of a slow-cooked stew, the kind that has been simmering quietly all afternoon, filling the house with the low, comforting smell of onions, root vegetables, and salted meat. A farmer's wife sits near the fire in a wooden rocking chair, mending a torn shirt by candlelight. Her needle moves slowly, steadily, in and out of the worn fabric, the same rhythm she has followed 1,000 evenings before. The rocking chair creaks softly beneath her, a small, familiar sound that seems to belong to the house itself. Across the room, her husband sits at a plain wooden table, going over the farm accounts in a leather-bound notebook, his handwriting careful and small to save paper. Beside him, a single candle burns low, its light pooling across the page, throwing long shadows against the rough wooden walls. Every so often he pauses, glancing toward the fire, toward his wife, toward the quiet room around him, before returning to his careful columns of numbers. Upstairs, in a loft under the sloped roof, 3 children lie tucked beneath heavy wool blankets, listening to the wind push gently against the shuttered windows. Their breath is warm beneath the covers, their cheeks pink from the cold air that always finds its way in through the smallest cracks. The oldest, a boy of about 10, is almost asleep, but he can still hear, faintly, the low murmur of his parents' voices downstairs. Steady, calm, unhurried, the kind of sound that makes a house feel safe. A wooden cradle sits near the hearth downstairs, empty for now, waiting quietly for the spring when a new baby is expected to arrive. Nearby, a basket of unspun wool leans against the wall, waiting for a slower evening, one with fewer chores and more patience. Life on a colonial farm moved with the seasons, the way it always had, the way it always would. Spring for planting, when the fields were turned over and the first seeds pressed carefully into the dark soil. Summer for tending, weeding, watching the crops grow tall beneath a warm sun. Autumn for harvest, when every hand in the family, even the smallest ones, helped gather what the land had given. And winter? Winter was for rest, for mending clothes and mending tools and mending small quarrels before spring came again and there was no time left for anything but work. There were no clocks ticking loudly on the wall of the small house. Time was told by the light outside the window and by the position of the sun as it moved slowly across the sky, and by the low, comfortable creak of the house settling around its sleeping family each night, the wood contracting gently in the cold. Outside, snow falls silently over the barn, where 2 horses and a small flock of sheep stand close together for warmth. It falls over the low stone walls that separate one field from another, walls stacked patiently by hand over many seasons. It falls over the frozen well near the kitchen door, and over the narrow dirt road that leads, eventually, miles and miles away to the nearest town. A road that, for now, lies buried and quiet beneath a soft, unbroken layer of white. There is a comfort in isolation. The farmer's wife finishes her mending and folds the shirt gently across her lap. Across the room, her husband closes his notebook, setting his pen down beside the candle with a quiet, familiar sound. Neither of them speaks for a moment. They simply sit, listening to the fire, listening to the wind outside, listening to the soft creak of the house around them. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once and then falls silent again, swallowed by the deep, snow-muffled quiet of the countryside. The candle by the window burns a little lower, its flame bending gently with the smallest draft. One by one, the fire's flames settle into soft, steady embers, glowing warm and orange against the dark stone of the hearth. And the farmhouse, tucked into its blanket of snow, surrounded on every side by quiet fields and sleeping animals, and a road that leads nowhere tonight, drifts slowly, gently, into a long winter's sleep. The same slow, patient sleep it has settled into every winter night before this one, and every winter night still to come. Now the years drift forward once more, like smoke carried on a slow wind. It is sometime in the early 1800s. A line of wagons has stopped for the night along a wide, quiet trail somewhere in the middle of the continent. Tall grass stretching out in every direction, farther than the eye can follow. The wagons are arranged in a loose half-circle, their canvas covers glowing faintly from small fires lit nearby. Horses and oxen graze slowly at the edges of camp, their bells softly clinking with each small movement. A family sits near one of the fires, finishing a simple meal of cornbread and beans. They have been traveling for weeks. Behind them, a home they will likely never see again. Ahead of them, land they have only heard about in letters, in stories, in rumors passed carefully from one traveler to another. A mother hums quietly to a small child on her lap, rocking gently in place. An older daughter sits nearby, mending a torn sleeve by firelight, her stitches uneven but careful. Her father sits a little apart, looking out at the endless dark horizon, his thoughts somewhere far ahead of where his body currently sits. The prairie at night is enormous. The wind moves across the grass in long, slow waves, making a sound almost like breathing. Above the wagons, the stars stretch from one edge of the sky to the other, uninterrupted by any city, any light, any sound but the occasional shifting of a sleeping horse. A general store sits dark and quiet, its shelves lined with flour sacks, tin lanterns, glass jars of hard candy. Above it, in a small apartment, a shopkeeper and his wife are already asleep, their bedroom window cracked slightly open to let in the cool night air. Down the street, a blacksmith's forge has finally cooled from the day's work, the metal tools hanging neatly on the wall, waiting patiently for morning. Near the edge of town, a small white church sits quiet beneath a sky full of stars, its bell still, its doors gently closed. A night watchman walks slowly along the empty street, his lantern swinging in a slow, steady rhythm. He has walked this same street almost every night for years. He knows exactly which floorboard on the porch of the schoolhouse creaks the loudest. He knows which dog will bark twice and then go quiet again. He knows the town the way you know the back of your own hand. Somewhere on the edge of town, a train sits resting at a small station, its engine finally cool and silent after a long day's journey. Steam drifts lazily from somewhere deep inside it, rising up into the cool night air and disappearing into the dark. This was a town much like thousands of others that quietly grew across this country. Not particularly famous, not written about in any grand history book, just ordinary and steady and calm. A place where people worked and rested and slept, generation after generation, beneath the same wide sky that once watched over river villages and wooden ships and snow-covered farmhouses and wagons crossing an endless prairie. The night watchman finishes his slow walk and returns to his small home near the edge of town. He sets down his lantern. He lets out a long, tired breath. And the whole town, at last, is asleep.